Hello, everyone. We are proud to host this webinar with our cybersecurity practice at USTGlobal, branded as CyberProof, and our dearest partner, Microsoft. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are located. And thank you for attending this talk, Automation and Data Analytics to Combat Increasing Cyber Threats. I am Richard Telleria, Managing Director of USTGlobal in Australia, and I will be the moderator today. Along with me, I have Abbas Kudrati. He is the Chief Cybersecurity Advisor at Microsoft APAC, and Halim Santoso for Microsoft APAC as well, leading the business development. Also, we have Anand Trivedi, our business head for CyberProof in this region. All right, let's dive right into the topic. In Australia, the increasing cyber threats and recent escalations of cyber attacks are well known and acknowledged. According to some analysis, cyber incidents targeting small, medium, and large Australian businesses can cost the economy up to $30 billion, which is close to the 2% of Australia's GDP. Furthermore, a 4 weeks interruption to digital infrastructure resulting from a significant cyber incident would impact up to 163,000 jobs. Halim, can you share some insights into these cyber attacks and trends, please?
Sure, thank you, Richard. Let me just take on the screen.
Thanks.
All right, so before we look at how the impact of specifically the current economic situation affects Australia, I want to take a step back really and help everyone understand what we're hearing on a macro level, right? And that's where we've spoken to a lot of partners, customers out there, everyone on this call as well, right? And when we broke this whole things down and we see the challenges that our customers are facing, I see 4 key points, right? And we call this really today the era of that transformation, the flux and transformation, all the changes that we're going on through today by our customers. The first things which is very important, right, is that our customers out there, businesses, everyone is in the technology business. Everyone is evolving their business structures, right? Evolving in the sense of digitization, evolving in the sense to address the needs of their consumers, their customers themselves by potentially accelerating their move into the cloud, right? So one of the key conversations that I'm hearing from a lot of our customers as part of their digital transformation projects is very common to hear that, as specific to today's COVID economic situation, because of the impact of that itself, we are seeing businesses having to either go online quickly, right? On top of that, historically their path to go of transformation or even to go embark into a cloud journey would have taken maybe 18 months to 24 months time frame. But today, because of the current situation itself, to remain competitive, to remain in business, to get the revenue that they need to, they're accelerating those journeys faster. And we are looking at journeys that's been accelerated up to 6 months right now itself, right? Now, the second point, which also relates to the first, based off of the evolution of our customers' businesses, the technology, equal to that is that the threat evolution, the threat landscape is also evolving. And I'll talk about that in the next section here. But what that meant is that our customers are faced with the ongoing barrage of attacks out there. And the way they've done that is by implementing siloed conventional security tools, right? That has always been the approach because of the way tools have been geared to address specific threats out there over time. And what that meant is that when our customers are looking at the threats coming within the organization, the siloed conventional tool sets have not kept up the pace because these tools are traditionally not integrated. They're not able to look at the wider telemetry. to understand the evolution of the threats out there that are unique to our customers' environment. Now, coupled with the fact that the tools are siloed, our customers' response teams, the analysts themselves, the security professionals, are challenged in the sense that a lot of the feedback that I'm hearing where our analysts are faced with is that they are seeing a lot of noise out there, right? The security professionals not only can't keep up with the alerts, making sense of the data on what to action on, right? But one of the most important thing as well is the skill sets that we are short of right now in our customers' environment. Actually, not just our customers, but everyone out there, right? Security professionals, we are short of their skill sets, and the skills alone can't meet that gap. And that's where I think it's key to understand the topic of today around how AI, automation, right, is geared to actually help our customers address their skill sets. Last but not least, of course, as our customers are evolving their businesses, going into the cloud, expanding their regions, right, they are faced with more regulatory requirements. And it's very common, right, where an average customer may potentially need to find a way to regularly assess themselves and comply to at least on average 4 regulatory compliance in general, right? The costs of remaining compliant is increasing for a lot of our customers. So with that, in terms of the challenges, let's look into the external side of things, right? What are our customers faced with today? The attacks, the malicious folks out there, right? Attack services by attackers today are relatively inexpensive, right? You would think that attackers would need to be creative in their attack when they want to penetrate a customer environment, but today a lot of the tools or even services has already been developed into an underground economy. And let's just quickly scroll through some of the typical costs associated to that, right? For example, the most expensive within the underground economy would definitely be the 0 days. 0 day attacks, 0 day codes itself, because of their uniqueness, right? It would range up to the price range of about 350,000. And this is quite obvious primarily because once that tool set or once that 0 day has been exposed, it's no longer as valuable, right? But apart from the 0 day attack codes itself, there are many other services such as loads, which includes compromised devices, which could cost very cheaply within the dollars that attackers can use to compromise, to attack a larger scale of things, right? Such as DOS, denial of services, where they could actually subscribe to services which provide DOS capabilities. And we can see here, typically prices ranging up to a monthly fee of about 700,000, right? In addition to that, let's look at the malware, right? Malware has evolved over time from the unique malware, the ATP, APTs, up to recently we've seen an emergence of ransomware, right? We could see that ransomware itself has evolved to a point where it's not just about creating the malware, right? The cost of a typical ransomware we could see as a cost of about $66 upfront, but uniquely as well, this malware has evolved into an underground economy where attackers can actually, instead of buying the ransomware up front, they could subscribe to an affiliate model where the authors themselves can actually get a certain percentage of the overall profit out of the entire campaign, right? That's how unique they are. And additional services that we could see is spear phishing and compromised accounts. Now, what this really means when we see the entire ecosystem is that, and it's common, right? Our customers need to be accurate all the time to protect their environments against the entire barrage of attacks and malwares that the authors out there, the attackers out there can cheaply get relatively inexpensive. However, the attackers just need to get right once to penetrate our customers' environment, right? And let's look, before we target down into what that means on an Australia economic perspective relating to the COVID, the evolution of the threat itself, right? The malware. We started back in the days of mass distribution malware, and we've seen that evolve ransomware, and as well as the recent couple of years where malware has evolved into what we call fileless malwares, and today malwareless attacks itself. These are how the attacks itself has, the threat has evolved very uniquely, where in the past it's easy to just target signatures because of the malware itself, right? But more recently, fileless malware or malwareless attacks tend to change the attack mechanism to actually leverage off of tools such as PowerShells, which are already legitimate applications and tools that our customers are using, right? Living off the land itself. So that's really what's happening out there. Now let's pivot that into what it means to our customers on the call today, right? We've also seen this reiterated from the recent Australia cybersecurity strategy in 2020, which was released not too long ago. These are stats that are related from that report itself. The impact of the threat landscape due to COVID itself. I've just highlighted some of the key points here, and it's stated in there which relates to our customers' challenges today, which I mentioned just now, the rapid and widespread uptake of digital technologies, not just by businesses, but by bricks and mortar organizations, households as well. Because of the COVID situation, a lot of them need to rapidly evolve themselves into a digital business. And because of that, the current COVID situation, we are seeing that millions of Australians are working from home. But while they are working from home, they are still trying to remain connected, right? Connected not just online, not just on the business side of things, but also for health, right? E-health services, they need to remain connected with their health practitioners, right? On average itself, one of the key stats that shows how our millions of Australians are actually more connected today is that in that same cybersecurity strategy report itself, we saw that the revenue of online shopping industry itself surging by about 21% last FY itself in March 2020. And that's by National Australia Bank. That's important. That just shows the amount of online interaction that our customers, the number of Australians are doing, right? Many businesses are transforming that, I sort of mentioned, right? Moving and accelerating their move into the cloud. And because of that as well, finally, we are seeing, you could see the type of attack sectors that our customers are being targeted by those attackers. Opportunistic cybersecurity criminals are rapidly adopting their methods to take advantage of what the current situation is, where Australians are working from home, studying and connecting online, right? One of the key stats itself that I'll share is within the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, just between March 10th and 26th, that's 16 days itself, the Cybersecurity Centre received over 45 pandemic-themed cybersecurity-related incidents, right? That's just within 2 weeks itself. And last but not least, one of the more prominent attacks that we've also heard recently is that in June this year, the Prime Minister in Australia also announced a large-scale attack that were targeting across multiple sectors, right? Announced across the private and the public sectors for Australian organizations, where they were targeted by a very sophisticated state-based cyber actor, right? So with that in mind, I'd like to also mention one of the key themes around the Australia cybersecurity strategy, which is very important, is that it is an ecosystem where everyone needs to play their part, not just from the private sector, the organization, businesses level, but also governments as well as the community, us itself, being diligent to protect everyone, protect ourselves from the opportunistic cyber criminals. So that's just a glimpse, Richard.
Thank you very much, Halim. So Anand, CyberProof is headquartered in Israel, which is the center of innovation in the cyberspace. What's your high-level view on these attackers?
Well, sorry, I was in mute. So Halim has given a very good insight on what is the cost of the cyber attacks these days, ranging from a few cents per machine to thousands of dollars, right? Now, it is important to understand who these attackers are as well. The way internet has evolved, the cyberspace has evolved. This has evolved as well. It started with some kiddos or some people who were just inquisitive to show their skills, and what we call as script kiddies. They do it just for fun or fame or to get their name on the social, and sometimes even for money. But to that, what Halim explained, right? The Australia faced a state-sponsored attack where it's well planned, it's targeted. There was, they got a lot of intelligence. It's either, what we call a cyber warfare. In fact, most countries are gearing up to protect their critical infrastructure, or I would say every country is doing that except a few. But to protect their critical infrastructure, because the next war between nations, or animosity between nations, wouldn't be coming out in terms of weapons and stuff, but more in terms of the cyber warfare. And between those, there are targeted attacks, which are either geographically targeted or industry-based attacks. And then there are more widespread attacks. Now, how do we recognize, right? We have a threat intel team in Israel, and there are threat intelligence teams that many organizations have. Now, what they do is they monitor the deep web, dark web, to monitor all kind of activities. And what we see is, based on the attack that happens, we can easily trace it to who the attackers were. The TTPs, that is the techniques, tools, procedures used by an attacker, gives us an information about who the criminal will be, right? The malwares that are used, the kit that is used, the techniques. It's just like any criminal scene. If we do forensics, right? Every criminal scene has some traces of what kind of crime criminal would be involved. Similarly, in an incident, it can be traced to either activists who try to make a point, or an organized crime who is targeted for money or to overtake. Sometimes even we've seen competitors do some stuff to get IPs out, or with other motives, as well as people who just ransomware these days are the most common, right? So when we're talking about ransomware, the ransomwares are ones where they're asking for Bitcoins, right? The cryptocurrency. Well, if we see the latest ransomwares, again, they're also getting more and more sophisticated. Earlier, it was just encrypting the machines, getting a pop-up that, you got to pay so much if you want this machine decrypted. But now hackers, what they do are they use the APT technique, advanced persistent threat techniques. And what that means is they use multiple techniques. And in the recent ransomwares, what we've observed is that along with the encryption of the machine, they exfiltrate data. So while there are machines being brought down, there are also threats given that this data that they have exfiltrated from the victim will be released out in public domain, right? In fact, not going too far, if we just go last month, we've seen a major camera company in Australia being attacked by a ransomware, which was the Maze ransomware. Again, if we go back to the Maze ransomware, it was traced back to two attacker groups. It was the TA2101 and it was the APT29, right? Another attack to a large organization where 30,000 machines were brought down, and in fact, it's in the news that they even had to pay ransom. It was another type of ransomware called the Ragnar Locker, right? In both these cases, there was data exfiltration along with the ransomware. So these are the type of adversaries that organizations are facing, and with ransomware, another typical behavior is it's not limited to the large corporations anymore. there are even small businesses which face these threats, and that's the need for more protection, right? So that's I would say the landscape of the attackers who organizations have to be wary with. Over to you, Richard.
Really appreciate it, Anand. We could see some interesting trends and learned about the attacks you mentioned. Abbas, you have been a CISO yourself, and now you consult security leaders on their cybersecurity strategy. In your view, what strategies should CISOs adopt to prepare and protect themselves for these constant and new age attacks?
Sure. Thank you, Richard. So let me share some of my ideas. So when it comes to the strategy, first of all, now, as Halim mentioned, cloud is being adopted by a number of organizations, right? Every company is a digital company, and they are relying on heavily on the cloud. So when you are moving your workload on the cloud, when you are using resources on the cloud along with your cloud service provider, one thing we need to really understand is the shared responsibility model and the strategies, right? What do I mean by shared responsibility model? So this is what you see on the screen is a classic model which we share with all of our customers, saying that now you are doing business with us. Depends upon the service which you are using from us. The responsibility of security shifts between both of us, or we share the responsibility between customer and us. For example, if you have everything on premises, then everything from data center layer to physical host, operating system, network control, application, all the way to the information and data is your responsibility. You as a security professional have to take care of everything, all layers of security on your side. But slowly, if you move your workload on infrastructure as a service, then the cloud service provider is going to take care of the physical network, the physical data center, the physical host, all the way to the VM or the hardware which they provide. And you as a firm or as a security professional, you need to focus on operating system and above. Same way, if it is platform, then we take care of all the way to the partiality or partial of network control and OS. Rest everything is your responsibility from application to the data. But if it is SaaS, then you only focus on the identity and the data security. So it is very important to know that level. And what we call in this phase or for this particular thing is trust but verify. So in this case, for each cloud service provider, you need to work with them for verification purpose. On the modern platform as a service side, you need to work on how you can modernize your infrastructures. And when it comes to the SaaS side, you need to focus on establishing the modern perimeter. Now let me show you a different view. How is the security responsibility shift between both of them, between the cloud service provider and you as a business? So in this case, you are transferring the responsibility of a typical threat such as denial of service, the racking, stacking, the capacity part of it, the fabric level security and the patches, all the attack which are on the physical network or the virtualizations or the hardware and firmware and network infrastructure. All these things are now transferred to your CSP. So you don't have to worry about them. They take care of that. And when it comes to the platform as a service, they take care of your security patches. They take care of the feature upgrade. They take care of the VM container security and operating system and middleware. Rest of the things which you need to focus. So the strategy you need to adapt is, what is my cloud service provider taking care of me in terms of security, and where do I need to focus as organizations in managing that particular security and the monitoring part of it, right? I will leave it at that and continue our conversation. Next slide.
Great inputs, Abbas. Coming back to Anand, how we can get quicker visibility of most important threats to your business?
Well, all right. So, well, we cannot control, right? So, what the external environment is, we cannot control. And Abbas explained, where the shared responsibility lies. But it is important that we have full control over our perimeter, our gates, and everything in our house, right? So we should get full control and visibility of that. And that's where detection lies, right? So you cannot control the outside world, but once who's coming in, and if somebody's in, how quickly you detect. And that's very critical to determine or to, of course, catch before there is a loss, or to curtail any loss if somebody enters, right? Now, when we are talking about detection, there are certain parameters where most organizations now have various tools, and these, let me say, tools do their jobs, right? So when we have an endpoint protection tool, it does its job. When you have your firewalls or your IPS and the WAPs or your identity management tools, each point tools like DLP and everything, they do their job. Still, there are attacks, and there are attackers are successful. Why? Because there are cracks. Now, these cracks either lie in processes, sometimes it's in patching error, but or it's shadow IT, where you do not know that there was an asset which was lying out there and was unprotected, or did not have the necessary configuration from a security hardening perspective. So these are the cracks wherein the attacker gets an opportunity to come in and cause collateral damage, right? So how do we gain visibility is to connect the dots in your organization, right? While you configure all of these, and when you connect the dots, each of these tools, the way it throws up, it detects is it throws up an alert and tells you that something is wrong. Maybe it's just an endpoint saying that there is a virus, or a firewall that there was a bad IP request, or there's a DDoS attack, right? Now, as hackers get more and more sophisticated, or they learn, it is important that we learn as well, right? We learn from our past, we learn from mistakes that others did, as well as things that went wrong in our organization. So you got to bring in the data, and then you got to bring in all these alerts, and you got to combine them to form use cases, right? So there are two things. One, you keep your house protected, and that's where the detection mechanisms come in. How you define your use cases, your vulnerability management program, your threat intelligence sources to keep an eye on the outside world on who's targeting you or who's trying to come in, because sometimes you will have the threat intel team might tell them there's some discussion going on about an attack being planned, or some IDs are out there which have been open, which seem to be stolen identities. All right, so or stolen data. So the threat intelligence, and then you combine it with what you inside in your threat hunting, your user behavior analysis, wherein you say, okay, this user's behavior is not aligned with his role or his daily routine, or this asset information along with this user, the way it's connecting from this machine, or what it's doing from machine to machine. It's something which needs investigation. And then if you have critical infrastructure or you have core assets, there are deceptive technologies which can be set up. You can set up breadcrumbs, and you can set up honeypots and decoys. Right. Now, one important mechanism that we use is the MITRE attack matrix. The MITRE attack matrix gives you tools, techniques, and procedures, TTPs that attackers use to carry out different attacks. Right. Now, for protection, what we do is we combine the MITRE attack matrix, and I would not go into the detail of the MITRE matrix because that would take much longer. We can have a separate conversation on that, just on MITRE, but we combine that with the business risk, right? So bringing in the business context and risk is important. And then you understand what tools, techniques, processes do you have? What are your control mechanisms to prevent these kind of attacks for these business risks, right? And then you identify those sources and then see whether those alerts are coming in. How do you develop use cases to cover those business risks using the multiple technologies and the alerts that or events that you receive from them? And then you combine to develop a holistic strategy to your detection mechanism, right? Now, these different use cases, of course, can be structured in a way that you have your use case development, and in fact, what we call it is the use case factory, right? In a use case factory, we define a negative outcome. A negative outcome is, when a certain alert is should have triggered to say that this is a negative scenario. That means, just like a false positive, a negative outcome is when you say that an attack has been successful. Now you define those scenarios, and then you define what the target systems are that you want to protect. What is the attack scenario? What are the preventive controls that you have? If those fail, what are the detective controls? And then, you also define your response window. So we have a full use case factory approach, and using all of this information, you define use cases in your security operations for detecting various threats to your businesses. Yep, over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Anand. Let's talk cloud. Abbas, as you know, cloud has provided companies with the ability to build and scale on the go. The pandemic has now only accelerated the cloud journey. So how are the security teams leveraging cloud?
Yep. Thank you, Richard. So definitely the part of thing which I talk about, the shared responsibility model, right? So security team has to think about what is the responsibility of a cloud service provider and what you need to do. But I want to go one step back in that particular question, as typically what are the top two challenges a SOC is facing today, right? So first is being on overwhelming signal which they are receiving. And second, which even Halim touched upon it, is a limited human resource capacity, right? So the first concern is how do we detect? And then in that detection part, we are missing the real detection because of too many alerts what we are receiving, because of chasing those false positive. And on the response side, until our defenders are busy finding the false positive and those real attacks or real detection alerts or signals within those plethora of signals, the attackers are operating freely until we are remediating that, right? So for that, what Microsoft is doing in that case is from billions of signals, and this is the story from our own SOC, right? From our own defenders. So this billions of detection and the signals what we are getting it, we are using a bit of an automation part here, because you cannot as a human, just be using a human force, it is not possible for you to analyze those billions of attacks or the trillions of signals you are getting into your environment. In our case, we get 8 trillion signals on a daily basis. So our mechanism is we use the element of machine learning and AI algorithm along with the user behavior analytics, and we try to use that funnel of all the alerts and detection what we are getting. We try to minimize that almost up to 90%. So those thousands and millions and thousands of attacks or alerts what you have, it becomes into hundreds of investigation. And then that's where our real capability, the automation part using our SOAR capability and orchestration capability, and our team is now focusing on time to remediate and time to acknowledge, what we call it. So let me show you one more detailed analysis on that. So we have our tier team here, tier 1 team, who is focusing on a high-speed remediation what they're getting. The top objective is the two path. One is the alert queue, which is our hot path. That's what we want to talk about it. And the second, which is the cold path, through which we want to do a proactive hunting. So there are two areas of signals what we're getting, right? Where are you getting your hot queue or a hot path or a high alert that you are getting from your normal signals, such as your EDRs or your DOS network security, and those gives you a continuous one. That is where you can focus on automation. So if you can use an element of automation in that alert queue, which is a hot part, that's where you can get a value addition on that. Second tier is where the level 1 analyst who's passed on the investigation to the tier 2 analyst for advanced analysis and remediation. But the cold path which I talk about, the proactive hunting part, that is mostly taken care by the tier 3 team, who are doing the proactive hunting, who are doing the red team, blue team kind of an exercise using the tools and intelligence sources which they collect. That way they can divide the workload using a bit of an automation part. Another challenge what we face is what we have typically seen is the attackers, which I call it as a red dragon, right? They are free to flying across everywhere rapidly across the organizations. They jump from identity to endpoint to file collaboration to applications and many more. While our defender, who are still trying to chase the attacker in a siloed environment, even when using a single SIEM. And the challenge we have is because of integration part, right? That is one thing which we always recommend to our customer, that making sure you don't focus on identifying those red dragon or the attacker into an individual area. If you have a good integrated system, could be a single source or could be one or two source which can give you that. And that is where your strategy of a best in platform comes into picture. When you have a best of breed where you have 80 to 70 to 80 different tools which you're trying to integrate and collecting those signals, there will be always a crack which attackers can take advantage of that. So having a good integrated system using a best of platform is something which can really give you a good value out of it. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Abbas. And we come to the last question, which is, in fact, about automation. The number one challenge in combating cyber attacks globally, and more so in Australia, is the scarcity of skilled and trained cyber warriors. We are in the living age of robotics, AI, and big data. In what scenarios is automation successful in responding to those cyber attacks, Anand?
Yep, great. Quick question, Richard. So when we're talking about automation, we got to understand that it's no longer a tug of war between the cyber criminals and organizations, right? It's machine versus machine. So we got to be better equipped. And when we define automation, and Abbas shared some of the automation that Microsoft brings in, right? So we are talking about how do we measure it, and the measurement, how we define that automation is successful is by defining reducing the response time, right? So every attack has a response time. For example, on the slide that you see, we've defined how the attack curve is, and this attack curve will be different from different kinds of attacks. Some attacks are spread much faster, or the damage caused is much faster. Say if it's data exfiltration, once the attack has happened, that is, the attacker enters the organization, he might spread slowly once he gets admin access and has established command and control, and then he's able to quickly exfiltrate the data. Or in case of ransomware, it can be much faster, right? Where it starts encrypting machines one after the other. So you define your curve for a particular attack, and then you define what is your acceptable loss limit, right? Where you can accept that, okay, if this much loss is bearable for an organization, and then you try to curtail your response time within that window, right? So that's how we measure the response time. And the entire automation exercise is to make sure that you reduce this response window. And that's possible because now you can build a data lake and draw analytics, of various behaviors that would have observed in the past, of similar attacks that were observed in the past, and how it was remediated, or how it was addressed. In fact, the fact is 80 to 90% of the attacks for an established organization are repeat kind of attacks. I wouldn't say it's the same malware, but the same techniques used, right, to get into your organization or to move laterally into your organization. It might be a different vulnerability that might have been exploited each time and a different malware used, but that's in the details. The overall technique might be similar. And that's where, when we look at the various alerts and incidents that the SOC addresses, there is a huge potential to automate, and that automation can drive a lot of efficiencies. Otherwise, you have a small though you might have a 24/7 team, your SOC analyst might be busy analyzing something that's come up, and the next one might take some time to bring up on his list to do, right? So I'll give you a couple of actual scenarios in which automation can be done, right? So let's take one use case. We're talking about multiple failed logins, right? So say there is an alert that gets generated. What happens once a SOC receives an alert of a multiple failed login? He creates an incident, he identifies the user, he checks with them whether it was a real person. If it was initiated by him, okay, the case is closed, it's acknowledged that the user actually did it. Or then he starts investigation, he looks at other alerts, or there are more alerts about failed logins from multiple users. He looks for the indicators of compromise. He looks for disabling the account, and then he would close an incident, and then of course he has to report that incident, right? Now this can take anywhere between a few minutes or half an hour to if it's very efficient, right? But let's look at the power of automation in this case. Well, if there's a multiple failed login, you can automate creation of incident. You can trigger an SMS to the user to say whether it was you, and he can say, okay, it was me, and the response, the case can be closed, right? It's as simple as that, and that can be automated. It can happen within a minute. Now, if that user says, okay, this wasn't me, you can go back to your Active Directory logs and start pulling information on how many more users, give that analysis to the SOC guy. He can okay, look at what is the commonality between these failed logins, and then what action is required. So while you can automate end to end, even as a first step, you can automate most of the steps that a SOC analyst does or has in his playbook, right? And this entire incident can be handled from the time of incident received by the SOC to closure within 5 minutes. This is the power of automation, and of course that since it's done, you automatically you don't have to worry about how many alerts are pending in the list. Right? Let's look at one more scenario. Right, we look at suspicious email. It's very common to receive an email with an attachment which looks suspicious. A user can report it, or it's the alert mechanism which monitors emails and says, okay, there's a suspicious email coming. Now, these are the steps. I would not go step by step, but either it would be an embedded link, it would be an attachment, it would be an email body which looks suspicious, or it could be the email ID, and he would say, this is not a standard normal user's ID that I receive, or the username is different and the domain that is given is different. So in each case, you gotta go back. What a SOC analyst does, he would use his playbook and look at what steps need to be done, and depending on what is suspicious in the email, he would start investigating, and then he would take the necessary steps to remediate and then close the incident. Now, this entire thing can take, if it's a SOC analyst gets immediately onto it, it could take anywhere between 30 minutes, an hour, or if he's already onto an incident, maybe he picks this up after 2 hours, right? And then he's been asked to report, and that reporting he starts making, it could he say, I'll deliver it next day because I have too much pending work. Now, if we have to automate this, right, we can actually automate the most part of it. You can the entire sandboxing of the email, to look at the attachments, to get information about the sender, using integrating different tools that you commonly would use, to creating an IT ticket, right, or to check for common fraud terms. Everything can be automated. If it's an embedded link, you can verify the link points to whether it points to a malicious site, whether it's an attachment which has to be sandboxed, or a sender's user ID, right? So you would validate authenticity. Now, if this is automated, this entire thing can be closed in less than 10 minutes in the system, right? So this is the power of automation. And all of this is possible because now you have standard procedures and protocols that are to be used. If you build a data lake, or you have you can run data analytics and get that information from the past, as well as you can use threat intel to get information from outside. You integrate all of this, build automation into your SOC, so that these scenarios, which are very common, can now be addressed much faster. And remember, a suspicious email just looks like an email with a malware is just one email. But once it gets in, it could spread and cause much more collateral damage. So that's where it's important to catch it right in the beginning. And we have our CMO, which is our bot who does all of this, and on our CyberProof Defense Center platform. But there are automation is now the way to go, and most organizations, I would say, are now compelled to look at automation, because the single most challenge today that if you ask anyone in cyber who is in the cyber in this cyber market, would say the resources. The resources are the single most challenge, the topmost challenge that organizations face when they talk about their cyber strategy or combating cyber attacks, right? So that means you do not find skilled resources. You have an attrition rate where somebody who learns an environment, learns how to protect, and is productive, but he moves on, and then a new guy comes in who then needs to go through the same level of training. If you do not have documentation, it could take months for him to be at a level where the previous guy was. So all of this has compelled the need for automation for organizations to combat cyber attacks.
So, Anand, I think that's great input. To summarize it all from what we are hearing for our viewers on this call itself, key things to summarize. Number one, right, what our customers really need is quality telemetry, quality alerts, right? We're using AI. Then apart from that, automate as much as possible so that our analysts can reduce the load, the noise, and finally move up the analysis activity to really the key investigations, the deeper understanding of the threats out there to help them understand what's happening within their environments. I feel that that's a good, I would say, summary of really the whole point around automating and AI.
And one last point from my side: mean time to acknowledge and mean time to remediate. Focus on these two KPI within your SOC. Thank you very much.
And with this, we come to the end of the webinar. Many thanks to Halim Santoso, Abbas Kudrati, and Anand Trivedi for your insights. This was great. And to all of you, the participants, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Please have a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.